"I think it's best if you leave," she said. Calm, as if the decision had been rehearsed several times that morning. The words weren't shouted. They were said calmly from across a dinner table, in a house that wasn't mine. I remember 20 faces turning toward me. I remember my hand reaching for the back of my chair, and I remember my son standing up before I could. Let me make a toast first. That moment didn't start at the table. It started 3 days earlier, with a phone call I almost ignored. My daughter-in-law said she was hosting a family dinner at her place. Something simple, something warm. She mentioned a few relatives from her side would be there. She said my son wanted me to come. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, listening to what she hadn't said. She hadn't said she wanted me there. She hadn't said she missed me. She'd said she was hosting. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Chains channel team, based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. My name is Leora Bennett. By that age, you don't expect welcome. You hope for courtesy. I thought about past gatherings with her family, the tightened conversations, the smiles that carried small, careful edges, nothing obvious, nothing you could name without sounding sensitive. Just enough to remind me I didn't fully belong. I was ready to decline when my son called. He spoke gently. He said it would mean a lot if I came. He said he'd be there the entire time. "It's just dinner, Mom," he said, though his eyes flicked nervously toward his wife, hinting it was anything but ordinary. That was what convinced me. Not promises. Just the ordinary certainty in his voice. So I said yes. I chose a neutral outfit. I practiced polite answers. I reminded myself this was his life now, not mine to manage. Still, as the evening came closer, a quiet unease settled in my chest. By the time I stepped into her house and saw who was already there, I understood why it had arrived early. The door opened before I finished knocking. My daughter-in-law smiled. The kind that arrives early and leaves quickly. "You made it," she said, already stepping aside. Not welcome, not "I'm glad you're here." Just confirmation. Inside, voices carried from the dining room. Laughter that paused when I appeared. "Mom," my son said, crossing the room. He kissed my cheek and squeezed my hand. It was brief, like he didn't want to draw attention to the gesture. Everyone's already here. Everyone turned out to be her family. Aunts and uncles I'd met once or twice. Cousins whose names I couldn't keep straight. People who greeted me politely, carefully, as if courtesy were an obligation they planned to fulfill and move past. "This is Leora," my daughter-in-law said, gesturing toward me. Not my mother-in-law, just my name, placed on the table like a card without a seat. "Nice to meet you," someone said, then immediately turned back to their conversation. I stood there with my coat folded over my arm while plates were passed around me. No one asked where I'd like to sit. No one offered to take my coat. My daughter-in-law moved through the room with practiced ease, checking glasses, adjusting chairs, touching shoulders. This was her territory. Everyone here knew the rules. At the table, my place was at the far end, beside an older woman who gave me a quick smile and said, "You're Jonah's mom." Before turning back to her husband, my son sat 3 seats away, angled toward his wife. "Wine?" she asked, holding the bottle just beyond my reach. A subtle reminder that service flowed only on her terms. "I'm fine," I said. She nodded, already pouring for someone else. Conversation flowed around me. References I didn't share. Stories I wasn't part of. I listened, nodded, kept my posture open. Years of practice had taught me how to be unobtrusive. When my daughter-in-law finally sat, she lifted her glass and said, "I'm so glad we could all be together." I noticed the way her eyes moved past me as she said it. The first comment came wrapped in concern. "You've been quiet," my daughter-in-law said. turning to me with a sympathetic tilt of her head. "Are you feeling okay? I know these gatherings can be a bit much at your age." Her tone was gentle. The words were not. "I'm fine," I said evenly. She smiled, relieved, as if I'd confirmed something she'd already decided. "Good. I just worry sometimes. Jonah says you still live alone. That can be hard." She glanced down the table. "Especially now." A soft laugh moved through 2 seats to her right. Another followed, quick and polite. My son shifted in his chair. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I noticed because I was watching him closely by then. "I manage." I said, "I always have." "I'm sure," she replied. "It's just that some people don't realize when they're becoming fragile." She said the word like a diagnosis, not an insult. "We're family. It's good to be honest." One of her cousins nodded. "She means well," he said, without looking at me. "I know," I said. I kept my voice calm. "Honesty is important." The older woman beside me leaned closer. "She's just protective," she whispered, as if that explained everything. Across the table, my daughter-in-law lifted her glass. "To family," she said, "the kind that looks out for each other." More laughter, this time broader. The room relaxed. Something had been decided. I felt it then. Clearly. Not the sting of the comment itself, but the response to it. The ease with which it had landed. The way no one questioned it. No one pushed back, not even gently. My son looked at me again. This time, there was an apology in his eyes. It stayed there, unspoken. Conversation moved on, but the tone had shifted. My presence had been defined. The comment had done its work. It gave permission. My daughter-in-law leaned back, satisfied. She had tested the room and found it receptive. I had been measured and found safe to diminish. I folded my hands in my lap and reminded myself to breathe slowly. This was only the beginning. When it was time to sit, my daughter-in-law moved first. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Let's take our places," she said, already pulling out a chair near the center. "We'll start." Chairs scraped. People shifted easily, like they already knew where they belonged. Couples paired off. Conversations continued mid-sentence. I waited, holding my napkin, until the motion slowed. My seat was at the far end of the table, not beside my son, not across from him, at the edge, where the table narrowed and the conversations thinned, close enough to be present, far enough to be peripheral. "You can sit there," she said, gesturing to the far end, keeping me on the periphery, where I couldn't influence the room. I took the chair without comment. My son glanced down the table. Our eyes met for a second. I saw the flicker of recognition. He knew. His jaw tightened slightly, like he was about to speak. Then his wife asked him something about the timing of the main course. And the moment passed. Plates were placed, glasses filled. My daughter-in-law stood to adjust a centerpiece, straightened a chair, leaned in to whisper to an aunt. She moved like someone entirely at ease, someone whose authority went unquestioned. "Is everyone comfortable?" she asked, smiling. Several people nodded. Someone said, "Perfect." She looked satisfied. Her gaze skimmed past me again, not lingering long enough to acknowledge the answer I didn't give. Conversation picked up around shared memories, inside jokes, stories that required no explanation among them. I listened. I smiled when it was appropriate. I kept my shoulders relaxed. From my seat, I could see the whole table, the way people leaned toward each other, the way my son angled his body toward his wife. His back slightly turned to me now, not deliberately, just naturally. I had spent years teaching myself not to take that personally. Still, sitting there, at the end, I understood something clearly. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't thoughtless. It was placement, and placement I had learned was never neutral. Dinner reached that polite lull where plates were half finished and voices softened. My daughter-in-law set her fork down and glanced around the table, as if checking that everyone was settled. Before we continue, she said, smiling, "There's something I want to address." The room quieted. Not abruptly. Willingly, she turned toward me. "Leora, I think it's best if you leave." She said it the way someone offers a reasonable solution. Calm, measured, almost kind. A few people shifted in their chairs, no one spoke. "I don't want this to feel awkward," she continued. "Tonight is really about my family. I just want to keep things comfortable for everyone. Comfortable." The word landed softly and stayed. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Some curious, some relieved it wasn't them, a few openly expectant. As if this were the natural next step, my hands rested on my lap. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. The reflex that told me to comply quickly, quietly, to make it easier for everyone else. My son looked at his wife, then at me. His mouth opened. She spoke again, gently interrupting him. "It's nothing personal. It's just better this way." Better for whom? I thought, knowing full well it was meant for the comfort of her family. "Not, I understand," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Years of swallowing moments like this had taught me how to keep my tone even. She nodded, satisfied. "Thank you for understanding." Someone cleared their throat. Someone else reached for their glass. The room exhaled. I slid my chair back slightly. The legs scraped against the floor, louder than I expected. My hand found the edge of the table as I prepared to stand. It felt like muscle memory, practiced and automatic. Across from me, an aunt I barely knew looked down at her plate. The older woman beside me folded her napkin carefully, as if this were a scheduled part of the evening. My son pushed his chair back. The sound cut through the room. "Wait," he said. My daughter-in-law turned to him, surprised. "Jonah, it's fine. We'll talk later." He didn't sit back down. He stood fully, one hand resting on the table. He didn't look at me. He looked at her. "Before Mom goes," he said, his voice calm but firm, "let me make a toast first." The room stilled again, not with ease this time, with tension. My hand froze on the chair. I stayed where I was. No one spoke. The pause stretched. Thin and deliberate, plates were nudged. A fork clinked against porcelain. Someone at the far end of the table adjusted their chair and smiled at my daughter-in-law, as if waiting for her cue. She took it. "Thank you," she said lightly. Already reclaiming the room. "I knew you'd understand." Her hand rested on the back of my son's chair, possessive and calm. "Let's not make this a bigger thing than it needs to be." Across from me, a cousin stared at the condensation on his glass. Another guest checked their phone, then set it face down with an apologetic shrug. The older woman beside me folded her hands together and looked straight ahead, lips pressed thin, choosing peace over truth. My son remained standing. He hadn't spoken again. "Not yet." My daughter-in-law turned back to me. "You can grab your coat whenever you're ready," she said. Kindly. "We'll wrap things up here." She assumed control was complete. The silence had told her so. I felt the weight of it then, not just the eyes, but the agreement behind them. Silence wasn't neutral. It smoothed the edges of what had just happened. It made cruelty look orderly, reasonable. "I'll walk her out," someone offered half-heartedly, already rising an inch from their seat before sitting back down. "That won't be necessary." My daughter-in-law said, "Jonah and I will handle it." "Handle it," she said, her tone neutral, efficient, as if removing me were just another part of the evening's plan. I let my hands fall from the chair. I stayed where I was. If I moved now, it would be because I chose to. My son finally spoke. Not to her, To the table. Before anyone goes anywhere, he said quietly, I need everyone to hear something. A few heads lifted, not with interest, with caution. My daughter-in-law's smile tightened. She hadn't expected this. Neither had anyone else. Including me. For a moment, nothing happened. My son stood there with both hands resting on the table. His shoulders tight, his gaze fixed somewhere just past my daughter-in-law. I had seen that look before. The one he wore when he was weighing consequences he wished he didn't have to calculate. Jonah, his wife said softly, not unkindly, sit down. You're making people uncomfortable. A few heads nodded in agreement. Someone murmured, it's fine, really, though no one sounded convinced. He swallowed. I could see it in the way his throat moved. He glanced at me, then back at her. His eyes held apology, fear, and something sharper beneath it. I knew that look too. If he spoke now, the tension would follow us home, lingering in every meal and every conversation. It would follow him home. It would change mornings and conversations and silences that hadn't yet formed. Standing up wasn't just a gesture, it was a choice. I felt the urge to make it easier for him, to give him an excuse. It's okay, I said quietly. I meant it in the way a mother means it when she's already preparing herself to be disappointed. I can go. He flinched at that, just slightly. My daughter-in-law exhaled, relieved. See, she understands, she said, placing a hand on his arm. There's no need to turn this into something it's not. He didn't sit. The room waited. 20 people holding their breath in small, careful ways. I looked down at my hands. I told myself this was familiar, that I had lived with silence before, that leaving quietly would hurt less than watching him choose not to speak. Seconds passed. Maybe longer. Time stretched thin. Then he straightened. No, he said, not loudly, not angrily, just clearly. His wife turned toward him, surprised. No, no, he repeated. He lifted his hand gently from the table, as if claiming it back. I'm not sitting down. Not yet. The air shifted, not dramatically, just enough. He drew in a slow breath. I know this is uncomfortable, he said. His voice steady now, but some things are supposed to be. He reached for his glass but didn't raise it yet. He looked around the table, then finally at me. I need to say something, he said, and I knew then that whatever came next would cost him something real. My son stood before I could move. I felt it beside me, the shift of his chair, the scrape against the floor, the sudden awareness that the room was no longer focused on me. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood, steady and unmistakable. Jonah, his wife said, her tone careful now, warning. This isn't necessary. He looked at her, then past her, as if seeing the whole room for what it was. It is, he said. Just give me a moment. He picked up his glass. But he didn't lift it yet. Let me make a toast first. A ripple of discomfort moved through the table. Someone shifted. Someone else sighed quietly. No one interrupted him. This dinner was meant to be about family. He continued. And that's why I need to say this out loud. He turned slightly. Enough that everyone could see me without making me the center again. That woman you just asked to leave is my mother. His wife's jaw tightened. Jonah. He held up a hand, gentle but firm. Please don't. The silence that followed was different from before. Not permissive, attentive. My mother raised me alone after my father died, he said. She worked long hours, skipped meals, and never once complained about what she didn't have. She taught me how to show up, how to keep my word, how to take responsibility when it would be easier not to. I felt my chest tighten. I hadn't expected specifics. I hadn't expected this. She never demanded respect. He went on. She earned it by how she lived. And she didn't deserve to be dismissed like an inconvenience in front of strangers. They're my family, his wife said sharply. So is she, he replied, without looking at her. And this is my house too. A few people shifted uncomfortably. An uncle cleared his throat. No one laughed. She's been polite tonight, my son said, patient, quiet. And she's been treated like she should be grateful just to be here. His voice didn't shake. That stops now. He finally raised his glass. To my mother, he said, for her strength, for her restraint, and for the dignity she's shown in a room that didn't offer her much. He turned to me then. His eyes were clear, unapologetic. That's my mother, he said again. For a few seconds, no one moved. My daughter-in-law set her glass down slowly. That was unnecessary, she said, her voice tight. This was supposed to be a pleasant evening. No one agreed with her. She looked around the table, waiting for someone to smooth it over, to laugh, to redirect the moment back into order. An aunt shifted in her seat. A cousin stared at his plate. Someone reached for bread and then thought better of it. Jonah, she said, softer now. You embarrassed me. He didn't answer. He stayed standing, his hand still on the table, his eyes steady. She turned to me then. I didn't mean any harm, she said. I was just trying to manage the evening. The words hung there. Manage? As if people were objects that needed arranging. I understand, I said, and I did. Understanding didn't mean accepting. Her mouth tightened. She glanced at the faces around her again. This time, they didn't offer her anything. No reassurance, no rescue, just distance. The silence felt different now. It wasn't protecting her. It was watching her. I noticed something shift inside me. Not relief, not triumph, just clarity. The kind that arrives when you finally see the shape of things without hoping they will change. My daughter-in-law straightened her shoulders. We should all sit down, she said, trying once more. No one moved. My son reached for my coat, which hung over the back of my chair. He didn't look at his wife when he did it. That told me everything I needed to know. I stood without being asked again. It's time, I said, my voice calm. Not brittle, not small. My son nodded. I'll walk you out. He picked up my coat and placed it over my arm, the way he used to when I was tired and pretending not to be. My daughter-in-law didn't stop us. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Whatever authority she thought she had left behind stayed at the table. At the door, my son paused. We'll talk later, he said to her. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. Outside, he held the door while I stepped through. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have spoken sooner. You spoke when it mattered. I said, and I meant it. In the car, my hands shook for a moment, then settled. I realized the lesson I'd been slow to learn. Dignity isn't granted by rooms that exclude you. It's claimed the moment you stop shrinking to fit them. If this story resonated, like it, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories about boundaries, family, and finding your voice. I didn't leave in shame. I left with clarity. She told me to leave her house. The truth made sure I never had to come back.